Some buildings were never meant to be emptied. They are not abandoned. They are just listening. This is the story of the Black Ridge Asylum, a place that was never truly silent. Even after its doors were chained shut, Black Ridge Asylum, built in 1903, tucked deep in the hills of upstate New York, where fog clings to the ground like regret and the roads twist in ways that make you forget where you came from. The story came to me through a set of letters, yellowed paper, shaky handwriting, no return address. The first one began simply, "They told us the screaming would stop after the doors closed. They were wrong. Asterisk, asterisk, that was all I needed to start digging. And what I found, buried beneath history, photographs, and hushed reports, was not a story, it was a warning. Asterisk, asterisk, Black Ridge was designed to be humane, a new standard for psychiatric care in the early 20th century. Red brick walls, tall windows, gardens for walking, music therapy, art programs. For a time, it was celebrated. It held over 400 patients at its peak, some voluntarily, most not. But the beautiful exterior masked what every asylum of the era eventually became, a dumping ground for the inconvenient. People with epilepsy, women who read too much, children with Down syndrome, war veterans with shell shock. One report from 1927 listed patient number 312 as too emotionally expressive, habitual storyteller, female, 16, recommending indefinite observation. That girl would never leave the asylum. Her name is not in the release records, only in the morgue. Log, 12 years later. Asterisk, asterisk, treatments included electroshock therapy without anesthesia, solitary confinement for overstimulation, hydrotherapy sessions in freezing tubs, lobotomies performed without consent, some in groups. Asterisk, asterisk, there was a basement ward called the Still Wing. No lights, no windows. It was officially described as a noise reduction space. Unofficially, it was where they sent the ones who wouldn't stop screaming. And according to multiple orderlies, the screams didn't always come from patients. Asterisk, asterisk, former nurse Eliza Woodfield, now deceased, gave an interview in 1969, never aired. Buried in archives, she said, "We called it the place where your own voice betrays you. People went down sane and came back stuttering, if they came back at all." Asterisk, asterisk, she also reported waking up with bloody hands. No memory of sleepwalking, only fragments of dreams involving patients she'd never met, all with the same face. Asterisk, asterisk. Whispers began in the 1940s. An orderly named Thomas Bell, whose journals I obtained through a private collector, wrote the following: "The door to room 9 opens every night at 3:33 a.m. No patient inside. Never has been, but I hear breathing. And the wallpaper is peeling in the shape of a hand." Asterisk, other reports. A priest called to bless the chapel found the crucifix turned upside down, embedded in the ceiling. An overnight nurse quit after witnessing what she described as a child made of smoke crawl across the ceiling and into the light fixture. Maintenance refused to enter the west staircase after finding it filled with feathers, but no birds. Asterisk, asterisk, there were no official acknowledgements of supernatural activity. But in 1951, all-night staff were ordered to wear earplugs. When asked why, the director replied, "To stop the bleeding." Asterisk, asterisk, no one asked what he meant. One patient, known only as Abigail M., would scream every night at the same time. Not random, not chaotic. She screamed a name, No one knew who Charlotte was, until one nurse realized that the name of the asylum used to be the Charlotte Institute, before it was renamed Blackridge in 1911. No records of that name change were ever found, but above the front entrance, under the rust and vines, the word Charlotte is still faintly etched into the stone. And yet, Blackridge was never officially investigated, never declared haunted, never included in books or ghost hunting shows. Why? Because Blackridge never asked to be seen. It simply waited and whispered to anyone who dared to listen. Some buildings don't die, they rot with intent. Blackridge began to fall apart long before it was emptied. The first cracks weren't in the walls, they were in the records, disappearing files, misplaced death certificates, patients listed as discharged, found buried on site. A 1963 whistleblower, Dr. Langford Brill, published a brief report anonymously. Blackridge has become a facility where patients are not treated, but hidden. Medical decisions are secondary to silence. We no longer ask what caused their pain. We only ask how to contain it. Funding was cut after multiple lawsuits from families. Allegations included overuse of physical restraints, experimental medications with unapproved side effects, cases of forced sterilization, unmarked graves found near the garden wing, and one accusation that was never filed publicly, but mentioned in an internal memo. One patient claims the asylum creates doubles, copies of people who disappear into mirrors and never return. That memo was signed by a janitor. He was found dead 2 weeks later in the still wing. His body had no eyes, just 2 pieces of broken mirror pressed into the sockets. The staff began quitting en masse, but many reported the same thing before leaving. "I can't remember who I was before I worked here," one nurse wrote in her resignation. "Every day feels like a loop I'm not allowed to wake from. I hear the patients in my own thoughts. One of them says I died here already. She died in a car crash 3 days later. The cause was listed as driver distraction, but police found a patient gown folded neatly on the passenger seat, her name stitched into it. Charlotte. The final years at Blackridge were chaos behind closed doors. Reports of patients attacking their own reflections, others claiming the windows whispered their names backward. Security. Footage from 1971, now lost, was described by a technician in sworn testimony. You could see shadows moving between frames, but there were no people. One figure looked directly at the camera, but only in the recording. In the moment, no one saw it. A therapy group began experiencing shared hallucinations, all reporting the same child appearing during sessions. A girl in a yellow dress, holding a paper crane. When one patient drew her face, another patient across the hall screamed, saying, "That's the girl who lives under my bed." There were no children in the facility. A fire broke out in the archives wing in 1975. No source ever found what burned. Every patient file from before 1940, and a handwritten journal that had been kept by the asylum's first director, a man named Rev. Elias Gray. All we know of his journal are the final words quoted by a surviving staff member: "God does not visit here. This place makes its own commandments." Doctors stopped entering the still wing. Patients were relocated, but one room, room 6, was sealed entirely, welded shut. The lock remains visible to this day, and on the door, written in red chalk, though no one admits to writing it, 6 is a mirror that looks back. In 1982, The state ordered the closure of Blackridge. The official cause was listed as unsafe conditions, structural instability, and a failure to meet modern psychiatric standards. But locals whispered a different reason. To many people, vanishing, patients, staff, even visitors. One social worker who came to review discharges walked into the third floor and never came back. Her name still appears on the visitor's log, but no one remembers her face. The final patient was removed on November 12, 1982, but the building was never properly cleared. Medical equipment was left behind, beds still made, chalk still on the boards and in the children's wing. Crayons were found mid-dash, drawing no dust, still warm. A music box sat on one of the beds, playing, even though it had no winding key since then. Blackridge has stood alone, its windows covered, its doors chained, its name forgotten by the maps. But some nights, if you stand outside the east wall and listen, you'll hear screaming, not in pain, in recognition, like someone just remembered who they used to be. A legend is just a memory that refused to die properly. Blackridge was never forgotten. It simply became something people stopped speaking of during the day. But when the sun sinks behind the hollow hills of Hollow Pike, the stories breathe. The most famous of these is the legend of the Blood Bride. The story varies, but the most common version goes like this. In 1921, a young woman named Eleanor Vesey was institutionalized on the eve of her wedding. She had attacked her fiancé during dinner, claiming his face had changed, that something else had worn it to dinner. They said she stabbed him in the hand with a bread knife. He survived. She did not, at least. Not in the way people do. Eleanor spent 47 years inside Blackridge when the asylum was being shut down. One of the contractors claimed he saw a woman in a makeshift wedding gown, gauze and hospital sheets stitched together. She stood in the entrance hall, staring through the boarded doors, and whispered, "You're not the man who promised to come back." Since then, people claim if you enter the asylum alone on a Friday between 6 o'clock and 6:17 p.m., you'll see her reflected in the glass doors, even if they're broken. Another tale is that of the doctor without a mouth. He wasn't listed on any staff records, but dozens of patients drew him during therapy. Bald glasses, wearing a long coat, and always no mouth, just skin where a mouth should be. They said he walked the halls at night, whispering into the ears of patients who couldn't sleep, but no one ever heard a sound. One drawing of him was found inside a patient's pillow on the back, written in shaky handwriting. He says he can speak through my memories now. That patient was found unresponsive, clutching a stethoscope not issued by the hospital. It had no brand, no origin, and inside the earpieces were human teeth. Then there's the 6th room. No one knows where it is. There is no room 6 on any floor plan, but people hear it. A ticking, a dripping, a faint mechanical worry. They say if you knock on any door in the asylum 6 times in a row and pause, a 7th knock will answer from inside. But when you open the door, it's always the same empty room with a chair facing the corner. And sometimes in that chair, you'll see yourself, but older, eyes stitched shut, mouthing something silently. I spoke with residents of Hollow Pike, the forgotten village nearest to Blackridge. Most wouldn't talk, but a few had stories they'd been waiting to tell. Janet Dempsey, 71 years old, My brother and I used to hear music in the woods behind the house. One night we followed it and ended up at the east wall of the asylum. But when we came back the next day, there was no wall, just trees. Robert Kill, former police officer, back in the 90s. Some local kids tagged the wall with red spray paint. That night, all four had the same dream. A woman in white with her skin sewn shut, crawling. Across the ceiling, one of them dropped out of school. Another tried to hang himself in the woods behind Blackridge. Tricia Holman, town records assistant. I tried scanning some of the old paperwork from the asylum. Every time, the scans came back corrupted. One file played audio when opened, even though it was just a PDF. A voice whispered, "You're not ready to be remembered." She doesn't scan anything alone anymore. There's an unspoken set of rules among the people who live within 10 miles of the building. Never walk past the western fence after midnight. Never bring mirrors into the woods. And if you hear someone calling your name from inside the gates, don't answer, because they say if you do, you'll start to remember things that were never yours. Blackridge never became a tourist site. It refused that fate. But its story leaked into fiction, like a toxin in the water. Silent Wings, 1987, a banned B-movie horror film, allegedly inspired by recovered notes from an ex-orderly. The film was never officially released. The projectionist at its only screening took his own life. No original footage exists, only fragments appear on encrypted websites. Each version is slightly different. New characters, new voices, but always the same ending. The Doctor reaches through the screen. House of Echoes, 1996. An Eastern European documentary team filmed inside a forgotten asylum with distinct similarities to Blackridge. The crew vanished after the third day. The only footage recovered shows one hallway endlessly looping. Each time the camera turns, one more person is missing. By the final shot, the camera lies on the floor, facing a mirror that slowly begins to crack. Today, ghost hunters refer to Blackridge as a dead site. No batteries last, no compasses work, and every recording eventually ends with the same phrase, "I remember your voice now," spoken in the listener's own voice. Blackridge isn't just haunted, it's habitual. It remembers those who remember it. And if you whisper its name in the dark, don't be surprised when it whispers yours back. They thought they were studying a haunting. They didn't know they were being studied. In the early 2000s, Blackridge became a whispered destination in the paranormal. Underground, it was never advertised, never featured on mainstream ghost hunting shows. But among the circles that mattered, forums, encrypted chat rooms, dead blogs, updated only during new moons, Blackridge was the place. And so they came. Some seeking validation, some chasing fame, some just trying to understand why the dark has such a good memory. Here are three teams whose stories became part of the asylum's living archives. Spectrecho 2007. Ragtag group of young engineers and psychology students. They built their own gear, crude but effective, helmet-mounted night vision cams, DIY EVP recorders, motion sensors made from laser pointers and fishing line. They entered through a broken window in the still wing at 10:43 p.m. What follows is transcribed from recovered footage. Okay, base camp established. No M spikes yet. They walk through the main corridor. Whispers are heard on audio, but not in person. Static floods. The mics every time they pass a closed door. At 12:31 a.m. is that ... someone waving from the second floor. But the second floor had no flooring. It collapsed years prior. At 1:04 a.m. all devices shut off. No power, no audio, no footage, no footage. 12 minutes later, the video resumes. They're outside, standing in a line, staring at the camera. Not moving, not blinking. One whispers, "We're who stayed behind. No memory of leaving Hechosa. 2013. Professional crew with multiple successful documentaries. They came with FLIR cameras, magnetic field stabilizers, pressure sensors, and thermal drones. Within 30 minutes, a drone goes down inside the children's wing. On playback, a humanoid shape above the drone is visible for 3 frames. In the thermal footage, one hallway registers -32 Celsius in the center, but only from the camera's perspective. When walked through physically, it feels warm. Lead investigator Dahlia Merck later reported, "I walked into the hallway and heard myself screaming for help from the opposite end." She described a sensation of being split, as if part of her was watching and the other was walking. She left the team 6 months later, moved to Finland. She refuses interviews. Whisper Core 2019. Just 2 investigators, both experienced, both skeptics turned believers. They had a unique goal: to enter room 6. They brought weld-cutting equipment, thermal blankets. Backup comes. They entered at dusk, cut the seal, and opened the door. Nothing unusual. At first, a chair, a broken table, a sink rusted into the floor. But the audio picked up a voice. "You're just in time." Then, silence. No footsteps, no screams. Both investigators exited 40 minutes later, but neither remembered what was inside the room. The woman, Riley, later developed aphasia, losing the ability to form full sentences. The man, Marco, vanished. 3 weeks after the visit, his last message, sent at 3:33 a.m., was a single photo. It showed the inside of a hospital room, and in the reflection of the window, room 6, despite the chaos, dozens of pieces of evidence have emerged from Blackridge, enough to form patterns, suggestions, and things that should not be dismissed. Audio EVP, a voice whispering exact names of investigators before they introduced themselves on camera. A child's laughter looped backward when reversed. It clearly says, "I know you from before." Silence, pure, absolute nothingness, recorded for 37 seconds. One sound engineer stated, "That's not normal silence. That's the kind of silence that expects something." Visual evidence reflections in shattered glass showing wrong people. Footage showing objects shifting positions between frames, without anyone touching them. One frame that flickers for a single moment and reveals a face in the ceiling, eyes open, stitched mouth, sensor, EMF spikes, forming rhythmic pulses, like a heartbeat. Sudden pressure drops, causing nosebleeds in 3 separate team members. Audio triggers only activating during specific words. Charlotte, room 6, whisper, number. Evidence is more compelling than what cannot be seen, only carried. And those who entered Blackridge carry something. Dahlia Merck reported waking up every day at 3:33 a.m. Every clock in her home would freeze at that time, even unplugged ones. Another investigator claimed they began seeing a girl in their dreams. Each night, she got closer. After the 6th dream, he moved. The dream stopped, but the smell of antiseptic never left his new apartment. One man who refused to share his name said, "When I close my eyes, I hear someone sobbing inside my skull. Not from outside, inside." He hasn't slept in over 4 years. Not everyone who enters. Blackridge comes out broken, but no one comes out clean. Because the asylum doesn't just haunt it, remembers, and if you listen closely enough, you might start remembering it too. Some places aren't haunted. They are haunts, living things that wear our fear like skin. I've never stepped inside Blackridge. I've read every file I could steal, every whisper I could coax from those who walked too close. But I've never crossed the threshold, and yet I dream of it. A hallway I've never seen, lined with doors that pulse like hearts. I walk down it endlessly, every night and every night. I reach the same room. Room 6, I knock once, and something knocks back. From inside me, what makes a place haunted? Is it death, tragedy, suffering? Or is it repetition? Memory that doesn't die? Thoughts that echo so loud they crack reality open? I don't believe Blackridge is haunted. I believe it haunts. It creeps into the quiet moments, when you're alone, when the light flickers, when you think you've forgotten something but can't name what. That's when it reaches out. Just a little dot to remind you, you were part of me once. Blackridge is still there. The town refuses to demolish it. Contractors walk away. Foundations shift. The land resists. Roots grow in strange spirals around its base. Some say it's the earth trying to push it back out, but I think it's the earth holding it down like a cage, like a secret, like something ancient and unspeakable that must never be remembered all at once. I've spoken to those who survived it. They all say the same thing. There's something inside the walls, not behind them, inside a breath, a voice, a shape made of sorrow and static. And if you stand still long enough, you'll hear your own thoughts change. You'll start remembering lives you never lived, and you'll know you've become part of it forever. If you ever find yourself near Hollow Pike, and you see a building that shouldn't still be standing, with windows covered in vines and silence so thick it feels solid, don't go in, don't look through the glass, and above all, never answer. If someone knocks from the other side of the door, because it might sound like a person, it might sound like yourself, but it isn't. It's Blackridge, and it's calling you home.